Welcome to First Down Sports. I'm your host, Ray Dunn. This is our CFL edition, FDS CFL. And sitting with me, as always, here to my left, Andy Jardine.
Yo, episode 3, CFL, season 2.
Episode 3. You got your Ticats jersey on, I see.
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Also, sitting with us again in the CFL edition on sound and audio, Jeannie B.
Hey, guys.
Hello, Jeannie.
Hello. Hi.
I have to say, this is a perfect camera angle for you, Jeannie.
Oh, you like this side? Yeah. Oh, I'm not sold on
it. Sitting down at the far end of the table, our special guest, Adam Hotshot Lunn.
Hello.
Welcome to the table, Andy.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
What do you got on down there? Is that a Calgary gear, I see?
Yeah, retro Stampeders one.
Nice.
Nice.
We have a Western Canadian in the bunch. So
we got a Western Canadian. New to Moncton. Now, Adam found us about 6 months ago on social media and has started listening to our NFL show and has joined us on our Canadian show. And he's actually joining the First Down Sports team. Adam, why don't you tell us about the project that you run?
I started a podcast on the QAMJHL team here, the Moncton Wildcats, and I just started it on my phone, and you guys are bringing me on under your umbrella to get me out to more people. It's the Moncton Wildcast.
There you go.
Very
Moncton
clever
Wildcast.
Yep.
Very clever. New building opening up. It was a perfect opportunity. They've been on us to start showing or start showing interest in their team as the local podcast. It's outside our element. Football's our thing, but now we're going to set you up with a team, get you at the stadium, and we'll First Down Sports will be there live.
Yep. That's what I wanted. No one else was doing it.
There you go.
Well.
Yep.
Great move. Well, welcome aboard here, Adam.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So as we've talked about, before we get into the actual show, let's just, again, our sponsors real quick. I'm not going to give you a whole lot of detail, but we got Moose Light. You want a beer? It's Scary Good.
Scary Good.
Hats, shirts, jackets. These hats, they come from Doyle's Corporate Image. Go see our buddies the Doyles.
The Doyles rule.
And if your kitchen sucks, Andy,
quit your bitching, fix your kitchen with some done right sauce. There should be some down there somewhere.
There you go. We got some done right sauce there that is going to help your kitchen out.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get into some football talk. I've been on Twitter the last couple days, and I'm even seeing it in some of the CFL groups that I'm in on Facebook, and everybody is starting to lay out their power rankings for 2018, and there's a lot of discussion as far as these rankings go. So I thought it'd be fun real quick for us to just lay out our power rankings heading into training camps, which open this weekend. We have rookies in camp right now.
Yep.
I know our good friend Trevor Harris just showed up in Ottawa on Friday, and he's been hanging out with the rookies during their camp, and he's hitting the field for his camp starting this weekend. So I think it's a good time to have a little pre-ranking here.
Yep.
How do you want to do this, Andy?
Up to you. Do you want me to kick it off?
Why don't you kick it off for us?
All right, so I'm going to give you my power rankings basically in the order of records. And I'll even tell you what record I actually think these teams are going to finish with. So number one in my power rankings is the Edmonton Eskimos. I see them finishing 12-6. At least that's my prediction at the moment. Followed by by Winnipeg, 11-7. Now, after that, I have two teams that I see finishing 10-8, and I'm actually going to put the East team ahead of the West team here just because I'm wearing their shirt. Hamilton Ticats, I'm buying into June Jones. I'm buying into Jeremiah Masoli. I watched all of their games after the coaching change last year, and if they're that or even 90% of that for this season, I think they win the East. After that, Calgary, also 10-8. I've got Toronto and Ottawa both at 9-9. So we'll put Ottawa first since they're friends of the show, followed by Toronto. And Saskatchewan, 8-10. I don't think the quarterback situation there is going to be as stable as people think. Caleros has a hard time staying healthy. Bridge has shown some great things, and he's shown some not so great things. And then BC at 5-13. I know they're trying to fix things up there, and they're trying to rebuild the team. I don't know that they're quite ready. And I'm being very generous with Montreal at the end of this thing at 3-15. I think they're an absolute dumpster fire, and we'll talk a little bit more about them later.
All right, there you go.
Adam, what do you got?
Adam, what do you got down there?
I didn't go power rankings. I broke them down East and West Division.
Sure.
That's how the CFL is.
Yep.
Which I'd rather it be all one division and top four the way it's been, but it's East and West Division, so that's how I broke them up.
Go ahead. What do you got?
In the East, I've got Hamilton at 11-5. Like you said, I believe that they can be good. Ottawa, I've got 9-9. Toronto, at some point, Ricky Ray's got to break down.
Okay.
And so I have them going 7-9, and then Montreal 4-13.
Okay.
In the West, I've got Winnipeg going 13-4. Edmonton and Calgary, I believe they go 12-6. I don't think Calgary's going to be as dominant. They've just lost too much. Saskatchewan's going 11-5, finishing fourth and crossing over. And then BC at 6-12.
Okay. All right.
All right.
And you said you had Montreal at 4-13, so you think they're going to be so bad that they don't even play one of their games?
Sure.
All right. Yeah, cool. I actually think they could be that bad too. So,
right.
Hey, Ray, what do you got?
All right. Well, I didn't go as detailed as you guys. I didn't go by record. I just went based on how I think these teams are going to rank by the end of the year.
Okay.
Okay?
Sure.
So I agree Edmonton should be up there. They've got a very good quarterback, very high-powered offense, good defense, good coaching staff there. So Edmonton's my top team. Calgary's always a great regular season team. Great regular season team.
Yeah.
So I'm still going to give them respect for how they play in the regular season and keep them at the second spot. My third team overall, the Ottawa Redblacks.
I know. Yeah.
I love Trevor Harris, as you guys know. Here's the thing about Harris, and we'll talk about this when we get to him at some point, but his offensive line is the exact same. Powell's back. A lot of his same weapons back. There's a couple changes on offense, but he's coming back to almost the exact same offense as he had last year. Yeah. We know last year that when he was playing, they were bona fide one of the best teams in the league, bar none. When he got injured and coming back from injury, it hurt the Red Blacks last year. So if Harris can come back and play healthy, there's no question. I think they could be the top third or if not higher team in the league. Then I got Winnipeg, Toronto, Hamilton, Saskatchewan, BC, and Montreal.
Okay.
I tend to lean with Andy in the fact I think Montreal's in for a 2 or 3 win season.
Yeah. It's not looking good. And we're going to talk a little bit of
I'm still very interested to see how Freeman's actually going to look come regular season, though, because Freeman was a pretty good quarterback in the NFL
for a little while.
For a couple
I can
seasons.
speak to that if you'd like.
Well, and
later.
we have a Bucks fan here, and we're going to get into this actually in one of our news items. Jeannie B, I hate to catch you off guard, but I'm doing it anyways. I know you're a fan of the Eastern Division in the CFL, and I just wondering off the top of your head, if you had to name your number one team in the East this year, who are you predicting?
The team I would like would have been Montreal.
Okay.
It is the team that I have seen the most in the past. I lived in Montreal, so I do like this team.
Okay.
But otherwise, it would be Ottawa.
Ottawa.
Yes.
Ottawa's going to win the East. Okay.
There you go.
All right.
That's our power rankings. We will put them. I'm not going to put your fancy records on them, but I'll put them in a spreadsheet and we'll share them on social media.
Sounds good.
Okay, save them out.
Done.
All right, let's get into Andy. You wanted to talk about the ratios of players in the CFL. Let's talk about that.
Well, as you know, since we started this CFL podcast, we learn the CFL and we learn the Canadian game. And you, as an official in the Canadian game, I'm constantly learning about the game on our show. So something I hear all the time in the CFL is, little things like you're only as good as your Canadian players, and that guy's a ratio breaker and everything like that. And I never fully understood it. So I wanted to talk about that ratio because it comes into play with some of our other conversations and how these GMs have to try to manage these teams. So I know you guys have somewhat of a general sense of how this works, but I'm going to run you right through it. So each team can have a maximum of 44 players, including three players who shall be identified as quarterbacks. Okay, quarterbacks do not count. So the ratio immediately starts to apply to 41 players, not 44. Not more than 20 of the 41 players can be international players. So that means you have to have at least 21 national players or Canadians. I'm just going to use Canadians, all right?
Right.
Yeah.
On your team. Now, each team must, this is a kind of a tricky one here, but each team must establish a reserve roster of 2 players. These 2 players can be national or international. Sorry, that's not the tricky part. I'll get to the tricky part in a second, which is a designation thing. So each team can dress a 44-man active roster consisting of those 3 quarterbacks that don't count, like we said, a maximum of 20 international players, now 4 of which must be identified as designated internationals, and then 21 Canadians. Now, the 4 designated international players are players who can play on special teams or replace an international starter, but they cannot be on the starting lineup. Okay? Of the 24 starters on the team, 12 on each side of the ball, obviously, a minimum of 7 starters have to be Canadians. So when that's applied to the starting roster of a team, it breaks down as follows. When you're using the minimum number of national players, there's 1 quarterback, 16 international players can be starters, and then 7 starting players have to be Canadians.
Right.
And then it goes on to kind of explain what it means to be a Canadian player or whatnot. I mean, let's not dig too far into that. But our buddy Ray Perkin, who's kind of our CFL insider, I was talking to him about the ratio too, because I just wanted like an understanding, like how do GMs use that to build their teams? What makes things tricky? What's the typical thing to do for Canadian players, especially we don't see a lot of Canadian quarterbacks, but they don't count anyways, right?
Why don't the quarterbacks count?
I think it's just because if for whatever reason, I'm just throwing it, I want your opinion on this, Adam, but I think like it's hard to find a good Canadian quarterback that's going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and if you do, that immediately allows you to put another international player on either your offense or defense, and that could potentially just break the system.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what you're thinking too?
Yeah.
So I was talking to Ray, and he was saying that offenses tend to be very Canadian heavy. The offensive line, a lot of times, is the majority Canadian players. I don't know if that's just because it's easier to find really good Canadians on the offensive line or whatnot, and there's not as much on defense. Now, there is this part of the ratio that I can't find exact information on, but there has to be some Canadians on the field at all times. I don't know what that number is, but apparently that's reviewed by video and everything.
Really?
The officials are supposed to be watching the game the entire time to make sure that the ratio is being upheld, and there's always at least 7 starters that are Canadians.
The officials,
like
the on-field officials?
Can't be the on-field.
Sorry, there's officials on the field, not the officials, capital O.
Oh.
And it's hard for them to keep track on the fly, but if they do and they catch a team not adhering to the rules during the game, it's a 25-yard penalty plus a fine.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah.
25 yards.
25-yard penalty. Now, I read about an instance where the Rough Riders were violating the rule, but it wasn't caught during the game. And like 3 weeks later, after reviewing video, they realized that it was happening, and they got the fine, but obviously couldn't get the penalty. So anyways, that's a little, again, Canadian players, you can only have 7 of them, but you have to have 7 of them, and Canadian players tend to get paid better just because they're harder to find, I guess, in higher demand if you can have a good Canadian player to help you with the ratio. So that was a learning experience for me to try to understand this stuff and figure out why it's such a premium to be able to have a good Canadian receiver, for instance, right?
I knew back in the day that you need to have 22 Canadians on your team, but I didn't know about all the specifics that you're mentioning here.
Yeah, so it's very like the GMs have to use this to juggle their roster, and I think it's kind of fascinating. I wouldn't mind the league going in the direction of maybe requiring even more Canadian players, especially at least on the starting lineup, but I'm sure it's balanced out this way for a reason.
So what do you think about the draft then, when it comes to which team do you think drafted the most Canadian players?
I believe that only Canadian players are in the CFL draft. Am I wrong about that, Adam?
I'm going to be honest. I don't follow it as much as I should be in out west, but I mean, the kid that got drafted by Hamilton, was he Canadian?
Yeah, Canadian.
Yeah.
He was playing U.S.
I think you're right. It's all Canadian kids in the draft, and
only Canadian.
And then the American players end up in that negotiation list.
You got it, and they get brought up if things don't work out.
I'm pretty sure they can draft an NFL player
if he's considered a Canadian.
Yeah.
If he gets that Canadian designation. If you want to fact check that, Jeannie, while we're going here, maybe. But I'm pretty sure that the
I don't think I'm allowed to have my phone out.
No problem.
No, you can.
Don't worry about it. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I realized you had the computer there, but you're actually doing the sound and stuff for us. I'm gonna fact check this. Yeah.
That makes sense because that's why the Stampeders had corners for so long and never had to worry about the issue because he was their running back in corners was Canadian, their fullback in Cote was Canadian, so they were set there.
They were set.
They never had to worry about it, and then they just drafted the beef on the offensive line and kept it going. So
I'm told Chris Jones in Saskatchewan, he typically builds his teams where it's practically an all international defense except one player. Like usually he'll have a Canadian safety or something like that, and then he just stacks his offense with Canadian players. But yeah, so I'm pretty sure the CFL draft, for you to be eligible for the draft, you have to be designated a national or a Canadian player. And that's why all the teams are fighting for the best of Canadian players because they're so valuable, right?
Well,
you need them.
I think what we need to do is we had the Podski Wee Wee boys on.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to get Travis from the Two and Out podcast to come out and give us some info on these Canadian player rules.
Sure. All right. Well,
I like that.
But in the meantime, I will at least confirm that there's only Canadian players in the draft, which I'm pretty sure. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay.
Sounds great. All right, let's get into Andy. You had some rules you wanted to talk about.
So another part of our podcast is constantly discussing and learning the Canadian game and how the rules are different. So this past weekend, the three of us in the room here, all four of us in the room actually were at a game here in Moncton. It was an interesting, I call it 4-10 because it's obvious, and I doubt it. Maybe they call it that everywhere. It's a 4-down, 10-man football. Very interesting.
Senior men's football.
Weird to me.
It was weird to me.
It's a mix of both.
Yeah. So, but either way, it is the Canadian game. And one rule that we noticed while we were watching it, and we started, talking about the significance of it, was the fact that at the end of a quarter with 0 seconds on the clock, oftentimes there's another play ran.
Right.
And I wanted to ask you, Ray, how that works. Like what is the situation where you wouldn't run another play and you'd flip sides of the field, and what is the situation where you would run a play? So let's start with that.
All right. So I'll give you a great example, and we didn't even talk about this pre-show, but I'll give you a great example. So in the the end of the third quarter of that football game, a lot of times it goes based on when the ball is set for play. If the ball is set for play prior to time expiring, you let them run one more play.
Okay.
So in Saturday's game, the score was a little lopsided at that point. So when the final play ended in the third, there was about 3 seconds left to go. I said to my umpire, take your time getting the ball. I wanted the time to run out.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I could wheel it and go to the fourth quarter.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have a smart referee that understands the timing to understand how things are going to work there. Okay? So in that particular time, there's no reason to run another play. So I tell my umpire to take your time. And for whatever reason, I can't explain why, but our timer, you also have to have a good timer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Our timer with 0.9 seconds left in the quarter stops the clock.
Okay.
Now I got to put the ball down, wheel it in, and let one more play go.
Got it.
In a very tight game, we'd put the ball down and there'd be a play. Okay? Football, or CFL football, Canadian football is the only sport that I'm aware of that end of regulation or end of timing, when the clock hits 0, doesn't mean the period is necessarily over.
Mm-hmm.
And keep in mind, in that third quarter, we run a play with 0.9 seconds. Had there been a penalty, we would have run another play. So it's been very interesting. I've seen high school championships. I was in a few years ago, Riverview High was playing against Fredericton High, I believe it was. And it was the end of the fourth quarter. Less than a second on the clock. It goes down to 0. Fredericton goes through the roof. They think they've won the provincial championship here in New Brunswick. Mm-hmm. The referee had blown the clock in, so one play got to be run. So he's counting 20 seconds. Now the offense has 20 seconds, even though there was only a couple seconds left on the clock. Mm-hmm. So offense gets up. They run a play. Pass to the end zone to a wide open receiver. Drop ball. Oh. Fredericton wins anyways. Wow. But it could have been very easily won by Riverview.
Right.
Had it, destiny gone a different way there.
Gotcha.
But yeah, the clock in Canadian football, if you've got a great timer and you've got a great official, mm-hmm. A clock can be manipulate a little bit, but the whole point is if that ball's down and it's ready to go, one more play is going to be run if the clock hasn't expired.
Got it.
That's how the rules actually go.
So will players and coaches be screaming at you to hurry up and spot the ball? Like hurry up.
Well, I'll tell you this. I just had a conversation with a coach this weekend about the fact that one of the biggest challenges of being an official is, first of all, fans hardly know any of the rules in football.
They know all the rules, I thought.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure they know every rule.
They know hardly any rules.
That's why you're supposed to bring your rule book to the game.
Right? I know somebody who does that.
Yeah.
They know the rules that help them, right?
Coaches know few rules.
Okay.
Right? And players know fewer. But here's the thing about the coaches. Here's the thing about being the coaches. The biggest thing I see, and this just isn't in minor football, high school football. I'm talking professional football. In both the NFL and CFL, is how many coaches don't realize how to run the clock in the last few minutes of the game. Mm-hmm. Especially in Canadian football where the clock stops on every play. Yep. You'd be amazed how many times I've seen games won and lost in big games because the coach didn't know how to operate the clock.
Clock management.
Wow. I see horrendous clock management skills at every level of football. That's the biggest challenge I find with football rules and spectators or coaches is that clock the last few minutes of a second or fourth quarter.
Yeah. Well, one thing I've noticed since starting to watch more and more Canadian football is that clock. I mean, you got a lot of time.
A 10-point lead is not safe in 2 minutes.
Definitely not. No.
I had one other question. The game we were watching, is there a play clock or is it running in your head?
It's in my head. I'm counting it.
Oh, okay. Because we didn't see it at all, and I'm like, what's the
if you go to
35 or 30?
if you go to university football here in Canada, it's a 20-second clock.
Right.
So as soon as the ball is set for play by the umpire, the clock runs. So when there's no 20-second clock, your referee, I'm counting it down. And you'll hear me say to the quarterback, when it gets to 10 seconds, I announce to the entire field 10 seconds. Oh, okay. Now, that's something I do personally. Not every referee has to do that.
Right.
But I like to announce 10 seconds. So, if it seems to go 15 seconds and I throw my flag, well, I'm sorry, coach. I just warned your quarterback he has 10 seconds.
Yeah, it makes sense. Well, I mean, if you have no clock to look at like they do in the CFL, then that's all you can do, right? So, anyways.
One thing, I did fact check it. I found an article on CFL.ca. It says players that are selected in the CFL Canadian draft are non-import players who are predominantly Canadian.
Yes.
American are not eligible for the draft.
Exactly.
Unless they're considered non-eligible. So it's all Canadian kids.
All Canadian kids. Yep. And that's why there's a draft for them, because there's such a premium on getting the best Canadian players on your team for the ratio. You have to have them. So
it's great for the Canadian college game to know that many kids have a shot at playing in the CFL.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Good talk there.
All right.
Jeannie. I think Jeannie has a true or false question for us.
I did, but I think it may not be valid anymore.
Oh no!
Well, let's hear what it was going to be. What was it going to be?
It was going to be about the Calgary Stampede. Stampeders.
Stampeders.
Okay.
Stampeders. I was reading that in French. That of all of the players that they drafted, they signed them all. So that from this year, which I think is a big deal because I don't think you normally sign all of the
teams are just starting to do it now. Now that the rookie camps are going, like another team just announced they signed all their Ottawa just signed all their draft picks.
Oh, they just announced
Yeah.
that. But I think what my question was how many of those were Canadians? And they all were
I'm gonna
Canadians.
guess all.
Yeah,
Yes.
I would have gotten that
But
one. Yeah.
I think it was more, I guess if I was to tweak my question, it would have been of those which were from U Sports because you can draft an NCAA.
Yes.
Yeah, good
If
point.
there's a
Good
Canadian
point.
player, like the guy that taken number 1 in the draft by Hamilton is a Canadian receiver, but he played
Central Michigan.
Yeah, Central Michigan.
In that offense,
Right.
in that same offense for Hamilton.
And in the
Yeah.
Calgary team, all 9 players are from U Sports.
Oh, nice.
I know Ottawa's lineman's
I
from
think.
University of Alberta. He went 4th overall.
So I think that's a
Yeah.
that's a pretty important, which
Yeah.
I love. I like this Canadian rule.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, awesome.
that's great. All right, Andy, we had some news items today you want to talk about. Why don't you lead us through that?
Yeah, I just wondering what you guys thought of this. It's been really funny following Darian Durant's Twitter. So Darian Durant was signed as a backup in Winnipeg. I believe that completed his tour or something like that. Was he that guy?
No, Kevin Glenn's
That
guy.
was
He
Kevin
just
Glenn.
signed with Edmonton this year.
That's
he's-
Kevin Glenn. So
he's done them all.
So we know from last year that Winnipeg's weakness is they don't have good depth at quarterback behind Nichols, right? Nichols is their starter, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, they had Dan Lefevre last year, who I knew from NCAA, and I mean, he got
And
in
Hamilton.
there. He got in there, and it was rough. So I believe he's retired since, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So they thought, all right, we're set with Darian Durant as our backup quarterback. He signs in Winnipeg. He's on the roster long enough to get his bonus, and then he retires. Now, whatever, I don't think everybody was all that surprised about him retiring, but it was the fact that the team started coming out saying he didn't even tell them. It's really nice to know. And I saw a nice little Twitter battle where he said, "Get your facts straight. I called so-and-so, who was the GM, said he was on vacation and would call me back. And it took a while, so I just went ahead and announced it, but they were aware." And it keeps going back and forth. There's a lot of heat here, and I was just wondering what you guys thought of that, if you heard anything about it, if you read anything about it.
I heard a little bit. I think a little bit of it. I mean, I saw a tweet today that he said, I was fully planning on playing this year in January when I signed that deal.
Right.
But things change, and I think it's kind of fitting. It's one last shot at Winnipeg from a Riders QB that's loved at, the Banjo Bowl rivalry. Like, oh yeah, I'll take your money and I'm done.
And I'm leaving.
Yeah. I think he was planning on playing, but like you said, things happened, and I didn't know about that. The GM was away when he tried to talk to him. But
That was his claim on Twitter. It's
Yeah.
funny you say this, though, and you mentioned the 2-and-out guys earlier. They're Riders guys. They're Riders fans, and they were talking about it on their podcast today, and they both said, we're kind of indifferent on the whole thing, but we will admit when we woke up and read the news, we started laughing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, here's the thing. Trevor Harris was on the weekend. He was on TSN 1200 1200 out of Ottawa.
Okay.
And this whole subject came up. And Harris was talking about, he really talked a lot about how the current CBA works in the CFL and the fact that it's coming up for renewal after this year. Mm-hmm. And how it works right now, February 1st is the deadline to sign players. Okay. So if they sign before February 1st, they get their signing bonus. Mm-hmm. If a team decides we're not signing Darian Durant, well, guess what? Durant gets cut with nothing. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of either two things are going to happen. A team can get screwed over, or a player can get screwed over, and that's the way the current CBA is written. Is there some common ground that needs to be found between the owners and the players? Obviously, there is, but Durant signed before February 1st, got his $70,000. At the end of the day, I mean, he's not a spring chicken. He's decided that he's going to call it a career, and Winnipeg's on the hook for $70,000.
I wouldn't give it back.
And I mean, he doesn't have to, according to the CBA.
Exactly.
Take the NFL, for example. Richie Incognito, who automatically said he's going to retire from the Buffalo Bills. Well, the Bills are going after him for a signing bonus.
Right.
Yeah.
And they should, because of the way things are with their CBA. But, in this case here, if the owners don't like this, well, now they've got something to talk about when these two groups get together to start putting together their new contract.
Mm-hmm. Sounds to me like that grace period between your deadline to sign players and, say, the CFL draft, which kind of marks the beginning of camps and things like that, is way too large.
Long.
Well, there's no clause when you sign your bonus before the end of January. There's no clause in there that says you must report to camp in order to get your $70,000.
Right.
So if I'm an owner, after seeing what I've just seen here, if I'm going to fork out any money, there better be some clause that you're at least reporting to camp.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's got to be something like that.
I keep saying 70,000. Is that like a?
Well, in this case,
just in this case.
In this case, that's what
high?
That's been reported as.
How high could it be? Do you think?
In the CFL, that's probably pretty high.
Yeah,
it sounds high
for a quarterback like him. Yeah, I would say that's pretty high.
That's probably.
I'm wondering what the highest signing bonus is.
I don't know. Player. That's a good question. Maybe we'll look into it. I mean, I'm thinking maybe there might be some out there for like 150 or something. But then you're looking at
more.
like
I would imagine the Bulls,
Ricky Ray, Mike Riley,
yeah. Because it's amazing the amount that the guys in CFL with the resumes have that make 500,000 maybe.
Yeah.
And the guys that don't win in the NFL that hold clipboards for X amount of dollars that just keep rising. Like it's an amazing scale of.
Well, I mean, you can make more money being on a practice squad in the NFL than you can in the CFL.
Yeah,
with Grey Cup rings.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
like being great at what you do, it's easier to go down and hang out.
Pretty much. Yep.
All right.
Well, next up, I wanted to talk a little bit about the draft guys. So, as you know, I'm really buying into Hamilton, and I was a big fan of Hamilton at the end of last year and June Jones and so on. So I was all excited when this deal. There was multiple deals that Hamilton made in the draft. I think they made their first deal with Edmonton and moved up to have a second pick in the first round, which they used to take one of the O-linemen. O-linemen went crazy in this draft, but they moved up to number 1 with Montreal. And I immediately started seeing all over Twitter and everything that they overpaid. Wow, they gave up way too much to move up one spot, and they probably could have got the Canadian receiver at number 2. So anyway, I'll give you guys what it was. So what Hamilton got was the number 1 overall pick, the 31st overall pick, which would be a first rounder in the NFL, but a 4th rounder in the CFL. The 44th pick, which was a 6th rounder. And then in 2019, they're going to get a second, whatever Montreal's second rounder is. And what Montreal got is they got Bombin, which is an all-star, all-division all-star guard that Hamilton had, and a Canadian player, by the way.
Right.
So a very valuable player. A wide receiver by the name of Robinson. I can't think of his first name, but his last name was Robinson. He played a little bit in the NFL, I think. And what I mean by play is I think he was on a team or something.
Practice squad.
Number 2 overall, obviously. Number 34 overall. Number 56 overall. And the rights to a negotiation list player. Now,
Johnny
got super excited thinking, I'm hearing, and we're going to talk about Josh Freeman eventually, but I'm like, the only thing in Montreal is Josh Freeman. And all we've been thinking is, I like Jeremiah Mazzoli and Hamilton. Who could use Johnny Manziel? Montreal could.
Absolutely.
So I was hoping very much
he'd love St. Catherine Street too. It'd be right up his alley.
A lot more than Hamilton. I can't even think of a street name in Hamilton, to be honest with you. But I look forward to visiting there.
Isn't it all industrial area?
Maybe.
No,
yeah.
I went to college in Hamilton.
Okay.
There's Gage Street.
Gage Street?
Yeah.
Well, we're going there this summer. Are we hitting Gage Street?
Yeah, we'll hit Gage Street.
Okay.
Jamal Robinson was the receiver.
Jamal Robinson, okay. So anyway, guess who
Upper James. Upper James is a big street in Hamilton.
Upper James.
Upper James.
Okay, well, we're going to go Upper James, then
2 Street pub crawl. Let's do this.
Gage Street, and we'll skip right through the industrial park.
They don't even intersect. That's the worst part. One's over here and one's over here.
I might have been off on Gage Street. I can't remember, but there's definitely an Upper James Street.
Well,
sorry to those people in Hamilton.
There's a King Street. There's a King Street.
It's probably a main street.
There's a King Street everywhere. All right, let's move on from this. But guess who this negotiation list player was? He was a quarterback.
Yeah.
Alex Trash Can Tanny. Do you remember him?
Yeah, I do remember that name.
Nope.
Absolutely.
He did the YouTube video with the trick shots
Yes,
where he was
I do
throwing
remember.
the ball into a trash can from the craziest places or
Yes.
whatever.
I do remember that.
That was his claim to fame. He did spend some time with the Browns and a bunch of other teams. Never actually, I don't think, did much more than maybe I think he appeared in some preseason games. So it was Alex Trash Can Tanny, who may or may not be better than Josh Freeman. We don't even know. So anyway, they gave up all that to take this Canadian receiver, number 1 overall. And again, if he's ready to start, then and you have a Canadian receiver, that's good for the ratio. And then they took an offensive guard with their second first overall pick that they also gave up assets for when they already had this bombing guy who's an all-star.
Right.
So I asked around, I asked our buddy Ray Perkin, what did he think of it? Did they give up too much? And all he said was, well, you know what? It really does look like they gave up a lot, but who knows what's going on, in the books. Maybe they were trying to dump salary. And then I saw that theory because a lot of people think, well, they're trying to dump salary to make room for someone else. They already have a quarterback on the team with the initials JM. Maybe they want a second one.
Johnny Manziel.
I don't know. But anyway, any thoughts on how much they gave up to move up from 2 to 1, considering the fact that they probably were getting their guy at 2 anyways?
I'm guilty of not following the CFL draft as much as I should as a Canadian.
Me too.
It's tough to follow because of the juggernaut in the NFL and the NHL. You just don't get the coverage. So
yeah,
if they felt strongly about the receiver they wanted, I mean, you go up and get the guy you want. I did a little research on him. He's from the Central Michigan, which is the exact same offense that June Jones runs to run and shoot. So
yeah,
he's fast and he's been in that type of offense. So
yeah,
I don't know.
Well, and I heard in CFL, when you draft a player, even really high in the CFL draft, you're not necessarily expecting them to contribute right away or start, on your offense or defense. Maybe contribute to special teams or something like that, but you're kind of drafting them on their athletic talent and what you think you can mold them into.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So when I see, Hamilton give away some assets and get the number 1 pick and also get another pick in the first round and get a Canadian guard. And June Jones has talked a lot about how he thought that there were some backup guys in Hamilton last year on the offensive line that were ready to go. I like the idea that they may have done this not only to get their guy. Maybe they thought they could still get their guy at number 2, but I like the idea that in Canada, the ratio and the money and everything is kind of complex, that they may have done this simply to shed some salary and move that guy on because they thought they had the next guy ready on a much cheaper deal. So
yeah,
I thought that was cool. But anyway, I'm really looking forward to seeing if this young Canadian kid, Mark Chapman, can play for the Ticats right out of the gate. So
there you go.
Yep.
All right. Do you want to talk about this Montreal mess real quick, or?
So I
think we've pretty nailed this.
Oh my gosh! But we got to talk Josh Freeman. So all right. So Ray Perkin again. He texted me the other day and just said, "Wow, this Montreal thing's a mess." And I said, "Oh, great. What now?" And he said, "Well, their defensive coordinator resigned." I heard today he didn't. He stepped down as the defensive coordinator, and they had another guy somewhat qualified to step up. And now this defensive coordinator is going to be a scout for the team. So, I mean, so apparently he's going to be a really well-paid scout. He's going to be a scout paid as much as a defensive coordinator for a little while. But that the stories out of Montreal is Josh Freeman doesn't look very good in camp.
He looks huge in camp,
He's
though.
a big boy.
Oh, my goodness, he looks
he's
huge.
a big boy.
He's
got the frame. He's a quarterback frame.
He looks like now I know he's older, but he does look like a younger Cam Newton almost.
That was a lot of the criticism or the comparison coming out.
Yeah. So here's nothing surprises me about Josh Freeman not looking good in the CFL. I'll be floored. I mean, he's going to make Montreal because they're Montreal and they don't have anything else. But this guy is not good. Number one, the receivers or the quarterbacks that you see succeed in the CFL aren't huge. I mean, Bo's pretty big. Mike Riley's pretty big. But, I mean, being 5'11", 6 feet tall is fine in the CFL.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's got some height going for him. He doesn't have a lot of mobility anymore. And the thing with Josh Freeman, and we'll get your take on it as a Bucs fan, Adam, but Josh Freeman doesn't like football, or at least doesn't like it enough to truly,
How do you get that?
And I'll get to it. The kid was a first-round pick back before the CBA change, made millions, okay? And just didn't dedicate himself to the game. And this year, when all the NFL draft quarterbacks were getting ready and you're listening to all this information about them, one guy, Carson Palmer's brother there, Jordan Palmer, talked about they brought up Josh Freeman as an example of like what you may or may not detect in the draft process. Josh Freeman, the coach his old coach, I forget who it was, Shiano, or who would that have been?
He had two, the one in Kansas State or the one in Tampa Bay.
The Tampa coach.
His first coach was Raheem Morris.
Yeah,
and his second one was Greg Schiano.
yeah, Shiano. So Shiano is who I'm thinking. So he flat out, Shiano came out and said the one thing with Josh Freeman was I couldn't get him to work on Tuesdays. So every major quarterback in the NFL, Tuesday is your day off, but those guys are in, looking at film, getting better. Maybe they take a portion of their day and go do something with the family, but like a part of their Tuesday is dedicated to football. And Josh Freeman told his coach right up front, no matter what, Tuesday is my day off, and Tuesday will have nothing to do with football for me.
Yeah.
And no matter what. So that immediately tells me that he's not all in, and it started to show. And he didn't improve. He started fizzling away. He had some problems. He tried to make some comebacks, and it just never worked out, and he never looked good. And I saw him play a preseason game during one of his comebacks, and it was awful. So
Colts?
Yeah.
The one of those, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, for a while, I would have been surprised if he even makes a roster. Montreal's in shambles. He probably will, but I really hope they have something else ready to go because I'm not surprised at all.
Maybe they need
They
to
have
trade
Drew
again.
Willie.
Drew Willie.
Who's been a CFL guy. Like, he's
Yeah.
been around. He knows the game. So at least they've got a capable backup. Not
More
a
of
bunch
a
of
more of a
not
short
a-
yardage
yeah.
guy these days. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Maybe
not
they
a bunch
should
of
trade
rookies.
and get him Trent Richardson as a quality CFL running back.
There you go. They'll sit there and motivate each other on Tuesdays. I'm sure very much so. Anyway, Montreal again. I called a 3. I said I was being generous, calling a 3-win season. Last year, you remember, Ray, every week when we did our CFL show, we predicted, we chose our locks of the week. And what was my lock of the week? Anybody playing Montreal.
Anybody playing Montreal.
And that's going to continue, I think.
All right. Well, season's not far away.
Nope.
Camps are open.
Yep.
2 preseason games, and we've got regular season football a month away.
I know. It's going to be
Technically
awesome.
3 preseason games.
Yeah.
Is there?
Yeah, there's like preseason 1 is just Saskatchewan and Edmonton,
Right.
And then all the teams get going.
And then
in
they
week
all
2,
get going, yeah,
And then
yeah.
if you look on the website, it's 3 weeks of preseason.
3 weeks.
Okay.
Okay.
But we're 11 days away from that first one, right?
Yeah,
On the
27th.
27th.
in Edmonton.
Yeah.
All right.
Awesome.
All right. Well, that is our show for the week, you guys. I hope you enjoyed our season 2, episode 3. Before we get out of here, Adam, welcome again to the set.
Thanks for having me.
Any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, I'm kind of excited to see what Josh Freeman does.
Okay.
Because, as a Tampa fan, he frustrates you. He doesn't run as much as he should. He's older. You're right, though. He didn't love football. He started well, got him to 10-6 on the cusp of playoffs, and then he found things that were better than football, according to some reports, and it started to slowly decline, even though they had weapons around him. So, he was on Montreal's negotiation list last year and was at camp and couldn't make the roster. So, I guess he just waited out his time for no other quarterbacks on the roster. And so, and the last one is Calgary. Like, I want to see what they do. They've lost a lot to their team with Messam going to Saskatchewan and Charleston Hughes going to Saskatchewan. I don't want to say Dave Dickinson's had it easy, but he stepped into a really good team, and now we're going to find out what him and Devon Claybrooks are coaching-wise. Because, like you said, in Calgary, nobody cares about the regular season. Fans-wise, we don't care. Let's go to the playoffs and then see what they do. So I think it'll be a very interesting season. I don't think they're going to be as good as they've been before.
Okay. Well, maybe Ottawa's number 2. Andy, final thoughts?
Yeah, I'm excited for the East. I'm really excited for this football to start back up again. Again, even Montreal. I mean, they're going to be interesting to see what goes on. I agree with you on Freeman. I mean, when you look at Freeman's stats as a quarterback, he only had one season where his rating was above 90. He's a career 57% passer in the NFL. I mean,
but he won't run.
Yeah, and he's not. So it's gonna, man. Montreal is really going to be interesting.
And they lost Nick Lewis.
Yeah.
Nick Lewis retired, who would have helped him along with the short.
Yeah.
Helps anyone along.
But I believe in June Jones and the Ticats. I think big things are going to happen. Any coach who goes out there and golfs barefoot is awesome.
On that note, Jeannie,
Canada.
any final thoughts at the audio table? How'd the audio go tonight?
Looks good.
Looks good.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
Any final thoughts?
No, I'm looking forward to the season as well.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right. Well, my final thought, and I wanted to bring this up earlier in the show. We didn't get to it, and that is Team Halifax.
Yeah.
Team Halifax. So my hopes have been fading a little bit as far as what's going to happen with Team Halifax. I just had Saturday night at Cheers after our football game. I got into a discussion with somebody, and I told them it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Here's my prediction, and I literally have come up with this prediction in the last 3 minutes thinking about this while you guys were giving your final thoughts.
Oh, it should be a good one then.
Oh, this is going to be great.
Yeah.
Halifax will be announced on opening week of the CFL season.
Okay. For a 2020 start or 2021
or
no specifics. Just
I think it's going to be finalized
so
for
a
the
month
start
from
of the
now.
season. Yeah, because that's kind of around the timeline. It's a little bit longer than the timeline than they said when we went there in February, but I think it's good timing, right? You know, that exciting, the season starting.
Yeah.
Boom, let's make this announcement. Randy Ambrose wants to make this announcement.
Yeah.
I think the start of the season is the perfect time to do it. 2020, I think, to build a stadium and have a team fielded by 2020, I think
tough.
that is really tough. I think 2021 is a better idea.
Yeah.
But who knows?
So being a newcomer, can they not, build this thing? If they announce it in a month, like we're coming in 2020, can they not start in Moncton? In that stadium, and then as the stadium's getting built, as a little preseason, we're going to start here.
They
get
could.
the Maritimes into it, and then move. Being the Atlantic team, can they not do that?
They absolutely could. I don't know if this ownership group would be up for that. It'd be a really smart move for Moncton to make that move. But listen, I think this team should be in Moncton. Period. Now. But Moncton blew it. I do think that team should be in Moncton. But
there's already a stadium.
We as a community blew that opportunity.
Yeah.
Yes, that's more along the lines of what you said on Saturday.
Yeah. Well, you know what, Ray? This Friday coming will be exactly 3 months since we went down to Halifax to see Randy Ambrosi. I left there 95% confident that this was going to happen, and what we were told while we were there is probably around 2 months they'd have more to tell us. Well, it's going to be 3 months come Friday. Haven't heard a peep.
Right.
4 months by the season starting.
Right, yeah. And so my confidence is dwindling on this too, but I hope to hear something.
75?
Let's say
approaching 50.
What's on the line?
Hold on
here.
Let's say they came out tomorrow and made the announcement.
Sure.
How big of an announcement would it be tomorrow? That's my question. How big of an announcement would it be tomorrow?
Depends where you...
Big enough
Depends
for
on
me.
where you
Depends
are,
where.
right?
Yeah.
But if you make this announcement on the opening week of the CFL season,
Way bigger deal.
that's going to have a much bigger impact, right?
But they have to announce the year at that time. They can't not say when,
Yeah.
No, I would hope not.
right?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, stay tuned, guys, because we'll be covering the Atlantic Schooners or whatever the heck they're going to be called.
They can't be Halifax anything.
No,
It's got to be a Saskatchewan style where everybody
That's
comes
the
to
only thing they flat out confirmed while we were down there. Is
okay.
it would be branded the Atlantic something.
Not even Maritime, just Atlantic?
Atlantic, he said it flat out.
Oh,
yeah.
hang on here. That call stopped the recording.
What call?
But not on here.
Nikki
so.
just called here.
But not on here, so let's just
Yeah.
wrap it up audio-wise.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
All right, hang on. 1, 2, 3. So, yeah. I don't know where we were in that conversation. My daughter Nikki called. I'm going to call her after this and reprimand her for
We're going to have to go on airplane
interrupting
mode
us.
next time. Yeah, all right.
Yeah,
so
we'll go airplane mode. We know that's an issue now.
Basically, you predicted the CFL in Halifax.
CFL will be
month.
announced opening week of the CFL season in Halifax. You got my word on it. And I am willing. If I'm wrong, here's what I'm going to do.
Okay.
If I'm wrong,
Gonna eat a carrot.
no, I'm going to eat a bag of Skittles and see if my sugars can put up with that.
Oh my gosh! All right.
There
And with that,
That's the
guys,
easiest bet.
we'll talk to you guys next time.
See you next
See you later.
week.
Later. Vegas.